I don't know what true crime video to watch. There's so many. It's a pretty decently lengthy one. She has a lot of views. Wait, I got this. Ah, there it is. These ones are good. How about this one?
Wow.
It's a little bit of an older case. It took place in the 80s, but it has kind of gotten a resurgence in publicity lately, mainly on TikTok, which has been really interesting. I feel like many people
Really?
who
How
may
old is
have
this video?
experienced watching this all play out
This
back
year!
when it was taking place might feel different about the case now, looking at it with fresh eyes. It's a very controversial case. I'm sure you guys will have plenty of opinions, of course. Leave them below. I love hearing what you guys have to say about these cases. Now Cuba's story really begins with the patriarch of their family, their father, Jose Enrique Menendez, who was born on May 6, 1944 in Havana, Cuba. His father was a former soccer star, and his mother was a former champion swimmer. And Jose really took after his parents. He was very competitive. He was athletic, and he normally got first place. He was very successful in all the sports that he did, basketball, soccer, swimming. When Jose was about 15 years old in 1960, things got really crazy in Cuba. Fidel Castro had taken complete control of the Menendez and was now Cuba's prime minister. Jose's parents felt like it wasn't safe for him there, so they ended up sending him to the United States.
They killed their
when
parents.
He was 15. So he came here alone, and his parents decided to stay in Cuba. I
couldn't find a video, so I just quickly clicked the one with Valkyrae because I remember she did these.
The regime, but they were hoping that they could protect a few, so they had to stay there. But they sent him alone to the U.S. And at first, he lived in his cousin's attic. It was definitely
I watched the one about the
for
Asian
him,
girl, though.
but luckily for him, he had sports still, so that was kind of a sense of normalcy. And eventually, he got
I think that is
Karina
Garcia.
So he ended up going to Southern Illinois
that?
University,
and
in 1962, he met Mary Louise Anderson, who went by the nickname Kitty. Kitty was just a few years ahead of him at SIU, and she was born in 1941. She grew up in Chicago, and she was a former
slime
YouTuber.
Queen,
so he was very attracted to her. They hit it off right away and started dating.
Ew,
In 1963, Kitty ended up graduating from SIU, and Jose decided that he was just done with school, and he decided to leave when she graduated. He was just 19 years old at the time, and they actually decided to go and elope. After this, they moved to New York, where Kitty was a teacher for a little while, and Jose ended up enrolling in Queens College in Flushing. He decided he was pretty good with numbers, so he was going to get his degree in accounting, and during that, he worked as a dishwasher part-time. Eventually, Jose and Kitty got pregnant with their first child, and it was a boy. His name was Joseph Lyle Menendez. He was born in New York on July 10th, 1968, and they ended up calling him Lyle for short. At this point, Kitty decided to quit her full-time teaching.
Does she have all this memorized?
She was a full-time mom instead, and she was very excited to be a mom. Eventually, the city became a little too much for them, so Jose decided to
that
move
one.
the
I watched that
family
one. I think
to
everyone watched
New
the one with the
Jersey.
Asian
Specifically,
girl.
they moved to Blackwood, New Jersey, which is a small, unincorporated community. And then on November 27th,
there was this other true crime one that I saw.
Second son,
where I don't know if it's true crime.
And around
It was
this time,
something
he had
I saw,
a big
right?
shift
It was
in
like
his
about
career
some.
path. He ended up going into the music industry.
It was about some lady, right?
Very different from accounting, but he
I forgot
really
what it was.
liked music,
Oh my God.
and he liked money.
Basically,
so
she did
he
like
decided to make the
witchcraft,
switch
right?
to the music industry.
And so
this
she
was a
and
good
this-
move for him
her
because
husband
by the 1980s,
went,
he was
had
a
people
top
pay them for like
executive with
fortune
RCA
telling and
Records.
stuff.
And he signed several
And then
really
she made a
popular
lot of
groups,
money from it.
the
Like
most
she was
popular
actually like
being Duran
rich,
Duran.
like
The family
crazy
moved
rich.
to $1 million
And so there was this
estate
one
in
guy, this
Princeton, New
president guy,
Jersey,
was like,
and
"Can you
both
rig
boys
the
attended
campaign for
Princeton Day
me
School,
so I
which is
can
a
win?"
very
Right?
prestigious,
Script?
top-rated
And so then
private school. And as
she,
soon
he
as
paid a
the
lot of money to
boys
her.
were old enough
And
to
what happened
walk
was
and talk,
they killed him
the
and like
expectations
buried
were
him.
set
Like
for
she
them
and her husband
that
and
they
like
need to be
their
successful.
assistant
They
killed
need to
the
excel
president
in
guy and like
academics,
buried him
in
somewhere. I forgot what it was.
athletics, and they weren't
But
the kind of
the
parents
TLDRs,
that were
they got
okay
caught.
with trying out a sport
And then,
just
like,
having fun with it and getting
when they
the
were
consolation
executing her, she was,
trophy.
like,
No,
smiling
they
and,
wanted
like,
their kids to
laughing
be best of the best.
maniacally.
So one sport that they got really into and they were very good at was tennis. Both of them were exceptional tennis players, actually. They spent a lot of money in training and classes and all of that. And their mom, Kitty, was like their cheerleader. She was always at every practice, every game.
Wait, so are the brothers, the two kids here, the ones who
from the
killed their
outside,
parents?
It looked like they were living a very comfortable and happy life. In
Like,
1986,
you know this?
Jose decided that he wanted to leave the music industry and get into the movie industry instead. So of course, where do you gotta go if you're gonna be in the movie industry?
LA.
Hollywood. So he packs up the whole family and
Is Hollywood
they all
in LA?
head to California. In 1987, Jose started a new job
Is
working for
LA
Live
Hollywood?
Entertainment, which
Is
was
that
a
where it is?
newly formed company that was already in trouble. Just to give you an idea, the company had lost over $20 million the previous year. So they were really not doing great. So Kitty was a little nervous, you know, making this cross-country move to this failing company. But Jose was confident that he could swoop in and save the business. And it worked because his first year, he increased the profits by $8 million. And the second year, he increased them by double that. $16 million.
Wow,
and
that's
he was known
actually
for doing whatever it takes, using some pretty ruthless business tactics.
Calling
but
old people
it definitely
saying that
paid
you're their
off for him because eventually he was named CEO. And when he started that position, his salary was $500,000 per year.
Wait, when was
with an
this?
additional up to
Is this like
$860
1980s?
million
50s,
in
60s?
bonuses. So the company took out insurance policies, life insurance policies, on all of the top executives at the company. Live Entertainment took one out on Jose, obviously, and they actually made themselves the beneficiary, which I guess is pretty common practice for large corporations. But they also had a second policy for employees that was worth $5 million, and for this one, they could have anyone as the beneficiary. At work, Jose was really applauded and praised by the people at the top, but everyone that worked under Jose really fucking hated him.
Oop.
In fact, it's safe to say he was despised by people he worked with. He had a horrible reputation with women as well.
With
he
women,
could be
not
aggressive.
that.
He was
Is
very
this Riot?
intimidating.
Is this
cutthroat,
is this the
ruthless.
the
He didn't
Overwatch?
hesitate
Not
to
Overwatch.
reprimand
I forgot what it's
or
called.
straight up fire anyone in the company that made even a slight mistake. And he was also known for some pretty shady business practices to kind of inflate the worth of the company. And not only was he an asshole at work, he was also having several affairs with people he worked with. And a lot of them weren't just little hookups, they were full-blown affairs, long-term relationships that were going on behind Kitty's back. However, it is assumed that
Wait, is this
Kitty
the father or is this the
probably
kids?
knew that this was going on and just turned a blind eye because he was making a lot of money and she wanted to keep the family together.
Oh my
so it's possible
gosh!
she knew, but we'll never
I'm assuming this
know
is the
for
father
sure.
then.
But even though she
Ugh.
probably had a gut feeling that all of this was going on,
She
or
probably
might
knew.
have straight up known about it, she still made an effort to be as involved in his life as she could be. She insisted that she went on business trips with him because she didn't trust him. And Jose
The way
worked a
people
ton,
have
went
these
on business
wait,
trips
oh
all
my
the
god, Moon, I
time.
see the doggy
So
sleeping.
that was kind of their way of spending time together. He was go,
Wow.
go, go, work as hard as you can, be as successful as you can. Now here's one very strange detail about Jose. He was ashamed of his Cuban heritage. At one point he was offered a letter of congratulations on his success as a Hispanic businessman.
I thought the dog
And
like
he was
passed by in the
offended
corner
by
of the
it.
room or something.
He didn't want any of his
But
colleagues
like he
to
blended
know about
in.
his past, where he came from, or even where he went to school because he was ashamed that he didn't go to an Ivy League university. And he was determined to have all of his kids go to an Ivy League school. So clearly the boys were dealing with a lot of pressure.
He didn't go to an
just
Ivy League and he's
being
successful,
Jose's
so.
sons. He decided when his boys were pretty young
Is this the tiger
that
parent
they
thing?
were going to go to Princeton.
Oh,
So
yeah.
at this time, their family was living in Calabasas. This is where I believe some of the Kardashians live. I'm not completely sure. It's a very fancy area. I've driven through it once. And they were really living, you know, the American dream. They rented a
Sharecropping?
house
Is that what
while
it
they were
is?
building
The
their
terrace
dream home,
farming?
which was actually on the top of the mountain, and it was on 13 acres of land. And on the outside looking in, they seemed like they had the perfect life. The American dream. They seemed like a picture perfect, close, happy family.
Yes.
And the parents were super involved in the kids' lives. They were always at their sporting events, very involved in who they were dating and their academics, especially Kitty. They had hoped that the boys would excel in school as much as they did in tennis, but that wasn't the case. They did more average in school. They weren't bad students by any means, but they weren't like top of the class.
Is this very
really
intricate, or is this just like very blatant? Like, oh, the kid just hated their parents. Was there like a whole plan? Like, what's the interesting part about this story? Is it how the kids killed their parents, how they plotted it, or the reasoning behind it, or what happened afterwards, or them running away? Like, what? Is it possible for you to tell me like what part of this was interesting? Like,
they had a couple friends here and there, but they really stayed closest with each other. And several people who were friends with them said that they got interesting vibes from the boys at times. Some of their past friends felt like betrayed by them or double-crossed by them. They kind of grew up having to learn to be very sneaky and aggressive and get what you want. That's what they learned from their dad. Now, Lyle definitely had a harder time in the family than Eric did. There was a lot more expectation on him, just a lot more pressure in general to succeed and to set a good example. And I'm sure some of you who are the first
didn't have any more kids after the two sons.
I know,
like
I definitely can.
A third son,
I
or
think
like a
the
daughter.
firstborn definitely has more expectations than the younger siblings.
True.
His father was pretty brutal on him. We'll talk a lot more about this actually. But one of the things that he would do to Lyle a lot was shame him about his physical appearance.
Bruh.
And one thing that he was very insecure about was the fact that he was going bald at age 14. And his father forced him to wear a toupee.
Oh,
that's how concerned he was with their image. He didn't want to have any imperfections in his children. And the boys definitely grew up learning that money is everything in life. It's all about getting as far as you can, being first place, being the most successful, and making the most money.
I'm sorry they weren't more on the end of like rebellious against their parents.
It was their environment, but they had no concept of money. Like when Lyle started driving, he wanted a Porsche right away. And his dad actually decided to have a little restraint and said no to the Porsche. But the boys both definitely struggled with confidence issues at the end of the day. Even though they were nationally ranked tennis players, they never felt good enough for their father. Eric really started to struggle with it more as he got older, and eventually he started to rebel a little bit.
Are these kids still alive and in prison?
With the wrong crowd, you could say. Eric eventually started bringing Lyle around with them, and they all started hanging out in a big group. And one particular time, they were all hanging out, and they decided that they wanted to do something rebellious. So they decided to break into a friend's home and steal what was in their safe.
What the heck?
One of Eric's friends actually had the combination. And so Eric, Lyle, this friend, whoever else, went over to another friend's house, stole their jewelry, money, whatever else.
But they were rich. They were like well off anyways.
These guys are rich. Like, why do you need to
exactly?
do this?
That's what I'm saying.
For them, it was really about the rush of it all.
Okay.
You know, it was the excitement. After that, they decided to plan another break-in into a different house with their friend. And after they did this, Eric and Lyle decided they really liked the thrill of it all.
Okay.
And they decided they wanted to do their own break-in without the friend at a different house. And this wasn't just breaking in as a little prank, maybe stealing something small.
Breaking in and killing?
They ended up stealing over $100,000 from
What if they end up
person.
breaking into their own parents' house?
Got away with it, which was very exciting for them. But then their friend, the one they cut out of the deal and hooked him up with the code for the first robbery, decided to rat them out because they did not include him in the second robbery. And what's really interesting about all this is
fake friends.
Of course, their parents found out that they had done this because they returned to the police.
That, I'm like,
but Jose was not angry that they committed this crime. He wasn't angry that they stole. He was angry that they got caught. He thought his son should be smarter than that. Tougher than that. And so he was disappointed.
I know there was like there is that type of thing, but just like I'm just asking general questions. The boys
had been doing things like this.
It's like if you had a brain, if you had common sense, if you thought about it.
Did some minor things at, and he would go and try to pay them off, get them not to report it to the police. But he wasn't able to in this situation, and that's what he was upset about, that they all got caught. The boys ended up claiming that it was just a joke. They ended up paying back the $100,000, and they also paid an additional $11,000 in damages. Then Jose came up with a plan to keep the boys.
And this is back in the day too, so it's probably worth way more.
And he was about to start Princeton, so Jose decided that since Eric was underage, he would plead guilty to the entire thing, all of the burglaries that they had been involved in, and take the fall. So Lyle was just given a slap on the wrist, basically, and Eric had to take the punishment. But it wasn't that bad. He just had to do some community service and get some therapy, which was good for him. This is when he was sent to Dr. L. Jerome Oziel, and he started seeing Eric regularly. Around the same time, the family decided that they were going to move to Beverly Hills.
Isn't Beverly Hills like expensive?
Mansion, and this place
is like crazy expensive.
Very fancy. It's a $4 million, 6-bedroom Mediterranean-style mansion on Elm Drive. It has a courtyard,
didn't Offline TV limit Beverly Hills at one point, or
a guest house, and a lot of famous people have actually lived in this house, including Michael Jackson, Elton John, and a Saudi prince. So when they moved in, of course, they were feeling really good about themselves. They felt like they really made it. They had the perfect life, or so it seemed. And to make it even more perfect, Lyle, their first son, ended up getting into Princeton like they had hoped. He ended up deciding to study business because his dad encouraged him to do that, follow his footsteps. But once he got to school, it really was not his jam. During his freshman year, he was put on academic probation for his poor grades. He was pretty much not even going to class.
Okay, but how did a kid like that even get into like an Ivy League school?
The social life of college.
When like
and then it all
had that
really
criminal
came crashing
record
down for him when he got caught plagiarizing in his psychology class. And normally when the boys got in trouble, Jose would come in and try to see if he could work the system, maybe write a check, get them out of trouble. So he tried to do this, but the dean of the school was not having it. So Lyle ended up being suspended for a whole year. And this really pissed off Jose. But he wasn't mad at Lyle.
Mad at him getting caught?
Of course not. He was mad at the university for expelling him. So as you can see, Lyle and Eric were never held responsible for anything. Everything was everyone else's fault at all times. And it was all about how can you cheat the system. So Jose ended up hooking his son up with a job at Live Entertainment. He was hoping that his son could just slide in and maybe he would work his way up the ladder the way that he did. But this was not reality. Lyle hated this job and he was a terrible worker.
The way these
Most
kids
days he came in late, acted like he didn't really give a shit, would walk around the office talking to people.
Yeah, it's like reverse
Tiger Parent. And he would normally clock out early to go and play tennis. Coworkers said that working with him was a nightmare. It was clear that he was only working there because his father got him the job and not because he actually cared about the business in any way. But eventually this all caught up with him, and even having his dad as the CEO was not enough to save his job, and he was fired from Live Entertainment. Meanwhile, Eric was still in high school. He was playing tennis. He was also acting, and he actually won a prize for Best Actor. So he was really thriving. He was also really into writing, and he and his friend Craig spent a lot of time writing together.
I feel like this is a lot of backstory, but like I felt like a lot of the info was a bit unnecessary. It almost feels a little
I'm just
repeated.
Curious where the actual crime
a little bit
is,
like we
I'm gonna skim her.
A screenplay together, and he was called
like,
Friends.
I'm curious about the actual crime.
Ah!
However, Jose didn't show much interest in it. So that was really hard for Eric. You know, he never felt like he was good enough for his dad. And it wasn't just like Jose would, you know, ignore his son's achievements and wasn't that excited for him. He was straight up disappointed in how the boys turned out. He didn't think they were good enough at all. He was super disappointed in Lyle because he dropped out of school.
BuzzFeed or ABC
because he failed
News?
at the job that he had given him.
Like about this crime or just in general?
And it seemed like he was even considering taking them out of his will. We're not sure if maybe he was planning on.
Wait, so what about the screenplay? What was? I mean, I'm assuming it was just
together,
like,
or maybe.
Can I just search it up? Wait. Screenplay. Oh, what is this? He made a screenplay called Friends about a rich young man who killed his parents for the inheritance money. Is there like a video of this? Okay, I know I'm not reading. I'm not actually reading. I'm just curious. Like, I want to read the... I mean, I want to see the screenplay thing. Oh, wait, Moon, are you saying I should watch, like, the actual, like, ABC video and not watch Valkyrae's, like reaction video? Oh my god, I can't type. Let me see. This one?
Today's video is kindly sponsored by corporations, but
What was I up to?
they didn't spend much time together on the yacht. Was of the school.
Oh my god, what was I up to?
Mansion. And then it all really. Oh, no, of course not. He was mad at the university. This week, like marriage that me and he.
Oh, this,
that
right?
Friends.
Oh wait, that's actual Friends.
Who murdered his parents? To actually a story
I'm just gonna go back
about
to
a
this
young
one.
man who.
I think I'm just gonna go back to this one. This one's just
Altering it a little bit so they would get their money when they were a little older and more responsible. So there was a lot of tension between them all. A lot more than anyone even could have possibly known at the time. And that brings us to August 19th, 1989. On that day, Jose and Kitty had chartered a yacht called the Motion Picture Marine, and they took Lyle and Eric shark fishing in the Marina del Rey. At this time, Lyle was 21 and Eric was 18. They all set sail that morning on the yacht. The entire Menendez family,
the mom
their crew,
or like Kitty's probably just out here like just watching all this happen, but she can't do much.
And the crew specifically noticed that that day the family seemed off. There seemed to be a disconnect between them. They didn't spend much time together on the yacht. They didn't seem to talk much at all. The two boys ended up distancing themselves from Kitty and Jose. They went and sat on a different side of the boat than them and didn't seem to want to be around their parents at all. The next day was August 20th and their maid was off. They had a maid and she did not work on Sundays. The boys ended up deciding to go see a movie together that night, and Jose and Kitty decided to watch their own movie at home in their den. The den is in the back of the house. It's very dark, cozy, and they were eating some vanilla ice cream and strawberries and just lounging around. Kitty was in her sweats, and they're just watching their movie in the den, having their ice cream, when all of a sudden at 10 p.m.
the double
Eric
kill
and Lyle burst through the doors with guns. And the two of them were obviously completely shocked to see their kids standing there with shotguns in front of them. And they started shooting right away. They both walked in.
What the heck?
And Lyle didn't hesitate at all. He shot his dad in the back of the head. He used a Mossberg
Why the mom?
shotgun. So
I understand
it did
the
a lot
dad,
of damage. And the plan was for Eric to shoot his mother. But he was panicking, and Lyle ended up having to do it for him because she almost escaped the room. She ran out trying to get help. She ran over the sofa, out of the door, and down the hallway, and that's where Lyle ended up shooting her. At first, he shot her in the leg at close range, and it was so powerful, it shattered her leg bone. They continued to shoot at them until they were out of ammunition completely, but Kitty was still alive.
No!
On the floor, so the two of them went outside to reload their guns, and while they were outside, Kitty tried to get up, and she slipped in her own blood and fell to the ground. When they got back, they continued shooting, and they shot her in the face, which killed her. Eric actually shot her twice to make sure she was really dead. She was shot a total of 10 times in her leg, in her arm, in her chest, and of course,
wait, so they killed them for the inheritance money?
Unrecognizable. It was brutal. Jose's death was brutal too. He was shot 6 times. He had a hole in the back of his head the size of a fist. That's how big, because it was so close range. They had unloaded a total of 15 rounds, and they decided to make it look like a mob hit.
Okay,
so
but
they ended
still,
up
like,
shooting
how
both
did
of
they
their
not
parents
hear?
one more time.
No!
Like, how? Okay, it's Beverly Hills like supposed to be like very like private property, like no one can hear.
And then at
anything that's going
11:47,
on.
a call came into dispatch from Lyle.
What's the problem? Someone killed my parents. Pardon me? Someone killed my parents. What? Who was the person that was shot? My mom and my dad. Your mom and dad? Okay, hold on a second.
Okay,
So
is that the
took
acting
officers
coming in, or is that like
a while
real
to get to the
crime?
scene.
Though, is what
It's
I'm
weird.
curious.
The boys expected police to be there extremely quick, as soon as the gunshots went off. Practically, they lived close to neighbors, and they figured someone had.
Yeah,
to
they lived
call
close to
police.
neighbors. Like,
plus,
how?
there were officers, patrolling in their fancy, rich neighborhood. This kind of stuff doesn't happen there. They thought that the gunshots would attract a bunch of police, but they were shocked when they went out of the house and were just waiting there and no one showed up. And the cops, of course, they did show up, but it just wasn't as quick as you would expect. Officers who were there said the two of them came out of the house hysterically screaming. They seemed really traumatized. Eric collapsed onto the lawn and curled up in a ball. He was shaking, hyperventilating,
okay, but the real question is
just screaming.
Yeah, I'm curious about the police handle this.
According to
because,
officers, Lyle was trying to comfort him, but was also hysterical. The officers who were there said their grief seemed genuine. They seemed heartbroken, petrified, like someone had really come in and murdered their parents, even though it was them. So then they go inside and it is a horror scene. The den is covered in blood.
Yikes.
The ice cream bowls are spilled, and then their 2 bodies are there, disfigured because they had been shot so many times. They were unrecognizable.
When I walked into the room and the television was on.
Oh my god.
Oh, is that the actual blood?
Blood and body parts all over the place.
Oh.
So of course they started their investigation with the boys, talking to them. Where were you guys tonight? And they had been at the movie theaters. They said they originally had tried to see License to Kill, but that was sold out, so they ended up going to Batman instead. Then after this, they said they went to the Taste of LA festival and came home to the scene. And police found them to be very credible. They believed their whole story, so much so that they decided to not even test their hands for gunshot residue, which is very weird because that's normally just standard procedure for anyone who's in a crime scene or near a crime scene where there's guns involved. But they were so moved by the emotions that the boys were having that they
were just that good at it.
There's no way they had any involvement in this. This was some random hit. And it was probably mob related because of their kneecaps. And the boys really pushed this story. They thought it made a lot of sense too. They said that their father had some connections, possibly.
But like honestly, the way they'd be planning more about like they'd be planning more on this murder than actually like in school and like trying and like you know what I mean, like
analyze the crime scene. They felt like the mob theory just didn't actually check out. The main reason being that this crime
mobs
was
don't
messy,
seem realistic
and
to
it
me,
looked
though.
personal. Normally with a mob hit, they come in, they shoot the person in the head. They do it as quick as possible and leave behind
You wouldn't just
as
like
little blood as possible. But this was
make
a bloodbath.
mess.
Plus, they figured that Kitty probably would have been kept alive because she wouldn't have been the target. Plus, they figured that there were
was this
plenty of
crime
other
based
people
off his
that could have
script?
done this that hated Jose. In his career, he had belittled, humiliated, and fired tons of people. There were plenty of people who would be seeking revenge on him. They interviewed several coworkers and ex-employees, but nothing panned out. No one seemed like they were that angry at Jose. I mean, don't get me wrong, plenty of people hated his guts, but not enough to kill him. And when people found out in the community that Jose and Kitty had been killed, they were pretty shocked, especially about Kitty's murder, because she was known as a really friendly, well-liked person. To everyone, she seemed like a loving mother, a devoted wife. Why would anyone want to kill her in such a brutal way? But no one thought that it could have been Eric and Lyle that did this.
But how did
they
they
were
caught,
sticking to
though,
their
is
story.
my
They
question.
acted incredibly devastated by the loss of their parents, and also very scared. They started living out of hotels right away, claiming that they were afraid that whoever did this to their parents would come back and kill them. They ended up getting bodyguards.
At least they
and
had
started
each
wearing
other, though.
bulletproof vests. But they also started taking advantage of the money right away. They started spending their parents' wealth immediately. August 24th, literally the day before their parents' funeral, Lyle ended up buying 3 Rolex watches. They showed up to the funeral,
honestly, as
all
Herbert
decked
said,
out,
watches
brand
are
new
a waste of
shoes
time.
as well, and they
Like,
showed
no
up
pun
late.
intended, they're actually
and
a waste
boys
of
were
time.
acting
Just
very
have a phone.
odd. A few people noted this, especially Lyle. He started making like casual jokes about his father, about filling his shoes because he had new shoes. He was casually talking to another friend about how they could get tickets to the US Open, and people thought that was strange. And it was a big funeral. There were like 200 people there, but very few of these people were actually their friends. Jose and Kitty didn't really have that many friends. They didn't attend a lot of social events or parties, so a lot of these people were just people that worked with Jose, probably people that didn't even like him. Then they also had a second funeral service a few days later, and this time Lyle gave one of the eulogies, and he talked about how much he loved his father and how he was so proud of him and would miss him so much. But they didn't seem that sad after the funeral. Like, the spending spree just continued right away. Lyle ended up buying a Chuck's Spring Street Cafe restaurant in Princeton for $550,000. He also bought himself that Porsche he always wanted, which was $60,000. He ended up renaming his restaurant Mr. Buffalo's, and he was all about the new business life. He even decided to start a new company called Menendez Investment Enterprises. He hired some friends from Princeton that he knew, and he also planned to franchise the restaurant. So he was making a lot of moves in the business world.
Okay.
Eric was also spending a lot of money, not quite as much as Lyle, but still a lot. He bought himself a brand new Jeep Wrangler, and he also started paying for private tennis coaching. And this tennis coach charged like $50,000 a year, so it was a pretty big deal. And they decided to keep living in the house. They just rented some new furniture to replace the blood-soaked furniture in the living room. At one point, they thought they might move out. They were going to put down a deposit on a $900,000 penthouse, but they decided against it. Instead, they leased 2 adjoining condos in Marina del Rey, and they threw a bunch of parties there. And during all of this, the mansion was just sitting there empty. You know, it was a reminder for them. They didn't really want to go there anymore. It was scary. It reminded them of what they did. And at this point,
like, why is this necessary to know?
Who really killed Jose and Kitty?
Because it's context.
Lyle and Eric. They continued to spend money. I think it was also a way of distracting themselves from the stress they were feeling from committing a murder. They bought themselves really expensive wardrobes. Eric eventually bought himself a Rolex. Those 3 Rolexes that Lyle bought were just for himself.
Yeah, like, why buy Rolexes?
Eric also got really into gambling, and he ended up losing a lot of money that way. And he ended up changing his original plan, which was to go to UCLA for tennis, and he decided to go do these competitions in the Middle East, and he did that for a little while. Eric was actually hoping to go pro in tennis. That's how much he loved it.
Puppy's awake.
An Olympic weight.
All was good. And as time went on, they just continued to spend more and more and more. And 6 months after their parents were murdered, they had spent over $700,000, which is equal to about $1.5 million in today's money.
They just started spending money.
The $5 million from that second life insurance policy. And Eric and Lyle were going to inherit all of this. And they probably would have spent more than they did in that first 6 months, but they didn't have
someone just donated $125 to her in the middle of this.
Through Jose's estate. And you're probably wondering why no one was suspecting them, you know? It looks a little weird with how much they are spending and thriving after their parents were just murdered. And you would be right. Detectives were starting to catch on. They started realizing that the 2 of them had a huge financial motive for committing this crime. Plus, the longer time went on, the boys seemed less and less interested in the investigation. They would never call and check in to see if they were any closer to figuring out who killed their parents. They didn't seem concerned about it at all. They certainly weren't acting the way you typically would if your parents had just been killed. So they looked a little closer at the boys, and that's when they realized that they had purchased guns on August 18th.
Bro, how do you not notice that?
Before their parents
I feel like that's like the first thing you should have noticed.
They used stolen ID to purchase the guns, and then they brought them home. Then they found out that the boys had also hired a computer expert to completely erase their family's hard drive. This was important too because they believed that Jose had the most updated versions of his will on the computer. So police ended up talking with Eric's friend Craig, who was the one that he played tennis with, and they were working on writing that script together as well. And so they asked him to go to lunch with Eric, and he did. It was November 17th. He asked him to go to lunch, and they did like normal, but Eric seemed very nervous, very anxious. Craig kept kind of poking at him, you know, what's going on? Why are you acting funny? And eventually Eric just confessed everything to Craig.
Oh, but he had like
really
he had like a tripwire,
and
right?
he told him how the plan was for Lyle to shoot his dad and how he was tasked
with
shooting his mom. He explained
so he just told everything, but like on the day that like
actually shoot his mom,
the police,
Lyle shot his mom as well. But they did not have a recording device for this lunch, so they asked Craig to go with Eric again and get the confession out of him again, this time wearing the recording device. He wore a wire, and then he also had a calculator with a recording device inside of it that he was holding underneath the table.
No.
And Craig asked him again about how he killed his parents, but this time he denied it. He said that they didn't do it. He explained that he should have never told Craig that, and that it was made up, and he and Lyle never killed anybody.
Okay.
So then they
he's
started
too
talking
smart.
to the family's therapist. Kitty was in therapy as well, and it turns out that Kitty actually told her therapist that she was afraid of her sons.
Oh.
That she thought they were sociopaths. It turns out she was so afraid of them that she was locking herself in her bedroom at night.
Oh my
and
God.
after the murder first
that's
happened, Eric
crazy.
continued to see his therapist, Dr. Oziel. And according to Dr. Oziel, around this time, the stress and anxiety was really taking a toll on Eric. In fact, he was getting ulcers from all of the stress. I can't imagine. And they had these really casual therapy sessions. Dr. Oziel thought he was
Self-reported.
him. I think he was kind of sensing that they may have been involved. During one of their sessions, they ended up just walking in a park. They had a very casual chat, and then they went back to Dr. Oziel's office. And when they got there, Eric just kind of leans up against a parking meter and casually says, "We did it." Dr. Oziel was shocked, and he brought him into his office and had him explain the whole story.
Please say you
This is where
recorded
Eric
it.
explained that after they murdered their parents, they changed into clean clothes. They
Oh,
jumped
yeah,
their shotguns
Christ, what
on
the
the
fuck?
road. They went to the movie
Thank
theater
you,
to
Mark
get a ticket as their alibi for the
0605
night.
for
Dr.
the
Oziel
Twitch
told him
Prime
to
sub.
call Lyle and have
Thank
him meet him at the
you.
office, which Lyle had no idea that Eric had just confessed everything, so he came and met him there. And he was just going to kind of talk to them, coach them, be there for them, but he was
Actually
secretly
getting
going
Twitch
to be
subs.
recording the session. And he decided that he was going to have his mistress at the time actually stand outside of the door and kind of listen in
Oh
just
my
in
gosh.
case anything went crazy while they were talking. And
Is that legal?
Wait, what?
Like-
I was so focused.
So say, okay, say you're a therapist, like, when are you allowed to reveal information on your clients?
Oh yeah, that. Okay.
Like, when is it, like, could he record these conversations?
Yeah, if a therapist just found out about like
Because
crimes
it is
like
a
this, can they
a murder?
say anything like legally?
Wow.
Can they do that? Can therapists do that?
I mean, the murderers, yes, but
Wait,
like,
let me quickly Google this. Can therapists reveal information on crimes? When Oh, a therapist cannot report someone who confesses to a crime. That's crazy.
I wonder where the line is for when therapists can tell other people or record conversations.
Okay.
Client confidentiality.
Well, that's kind of creepy.
It's illegal
though.
to
Like,
record.
Ima-
I'm
th-
pretty
this-
sure. I'm pretty
Like, imagine,
sure.
imagine just being a therapist and you're just like talking to these criminals. Like, I'm imagining if I were a therapist, right? And just the person in front of me is like, I killed people. Like, I'm like, I would be scared. I'd be like, okay, I should quit my job now, but they're gonna kill me next if I
There
quit
is
my
no
job.
line.
You know?
Like, you're just not supposed to.
Oziel healed
Like-
anytime. And when Lyle
Like, I
found
would be
out
scared,
that
like,
Eric
genuinely,
had spilled the beans to Dr. Oziel, he was
Because I
pissed.
can't even quit
This
my
was
job,
not
because if
part
I
of
quit
the
my job,
plan.
they're
They
probably
were
gonna go
supposed to
after
get
me
away
next.
with this, and he actually ended up threatening to kill Dr. Oziel if he told anyone. And instead
Okay,
of going
so-
to the police
okay.
right away, he continued to see the brothers. He continued to have several
Wow.
sessions with them, and he recorded all of it. And they began
Wow.
talking about the murders in more detail. Dr. Oziel
In more
was
de-
just keeping
Oh,
all of this information
okay.
until the day that his mistress, her name is Judalon, actually went to the police
Wow.
and gave them the information. And she said that she did this because Dr. Oziel was abusive to her.
Okay.
Oh.
And
okay.
she wanted to kind of get revenge on him.
Oh
so
my
the police
gosh.
found out that he had
That's kind of ironic, though.
confession
Therapists
tapes from the boys,
abusing
and that they
her.
were the ones who murdered their parents. So they got a subpoena for the tapes, went and seized them from a safety deposit box that he had in a bank on Ventura Boulevard. And right away they got
Ventura
word that
Boulevard!
Lyle might flee the state over this, that he was terrified of getting caught. So they decided that they could waste no time. Lyle clearly knew that the jig was up. So on March 8th, 1990, over
Yeah,
a
you
dozen
would think therapists
police
are sane.
officers actually stopped him as he was pulling out of
To
his
some
driveway.
extent, I mean,
They had him get
obviously.
out of the vehicle, lay down on the ground, face down. They handcuffed him and took him into the police station. It was over. And Eric at the time was actually at a tennis tournament in Israel.
We got a call at 6 in the morning
Wow.
from Lyle's attorney
So
saying
he was-
you have to get on an LL flight immediately and get home.
So he was just like in the middle of like his tournament,
just
just like
call. He
caught?
was crying hysterically. He ended up flying to Miami, where several of his relatives lived, and then his aunt convinced him to fly back to LA and just turn himself in. He surrendered at LAX on March 11th, 1990. And they wasted no time. The charges were filed against the boys the next day. But it was weird. During the arraignment, the boys didn't look that worried. They came into
the extra money
Beverly
go,
Hills
though,
court.
Yeah, why? What?
Fancy
Is
outfits.
it just like held off until they get
were
out?
smiling. They seemed confident.
Mr. Eric Galen Menendez, do you understand the charges against you?
I understand both of them, Your Honor.
Yeah, I can imagine if you're surrounded by like
Mr.
negativity all
Joseph
around.
Lyle Menendez,
Kinda
do
gets
you
to you.
understand the charges against you?
Yes.
And when people found out that the Menendez brothers had been charged with killing their parents, friends and family couldn't believe it. Some of their family members
But I feel like
supported them
if
still,
you start
though.
going
They sat in the front
insane,
row
like, you know, when you
at
start
trial.
losing it, I feel like
Their
that's like
tennis
a
coach sat in
sign
the
to
front
be
row,
like, you know,
and
because
Eric's
you know, if you're a
girlfriend,
therapist,
even
right,
their
I imagine
grandma
like
sat in
you
the
are
front
your
row.
own therapist,
Jose's
right?
mother.
So like it would
And
probably be the right
she
call, be like,
always
all right,
believed
I
that
don't
the
think
boys
maybe
were
like
innocent.
I
At
should
their
like take a
arraignment, the
break,
judge
just take a
explained
vacation,
that
you know,
they were both
chill,
being
or like,
charged
you
with
know,
killing
find
their
something
parents
else.
for
Guidance
financial
be a
gain,
guidance counselor
and
for
that they
kids or
could
something,
be
because that's kind of
facing the
therapy,
death
right?
penalty, and asked them how they plead, and both of them said not guilty. So the defense and prosecution
Not
spent
guilty.
a
The fuck?
lot
They
of
had
time
all the
arguing
evidence, though.
over whether or not the tapes that Dr. Oziel had recorded could be admissible in court. Is it fair game because they're murderers, or
Where's the
does
dog?
it fall under doctor-patient confidentiality? The Supreme Court of
where's the
California
dog, though?
actually made the decision that 2 out of the 3 tapes were able to be used in court.
Why
And
not
one
the
of these
third one?
tapes had Lyle's confession on it. They determined that because Lyle had threatened Dr. Oziel's life, it forfeits his right to the doctor-patient
Ooh.
confidentiality. And going into the trial, they knew that now that those tapes were going to be fair game, they could not pretend that the boys didn't commit this crime. They were going to have a different strategy.
Okay.
So in July of 93,
There's like a whole
it
battle,
was
yo.
announced for the first time ever that Eric and Lyle had actually killed their parents in self-defense after a
Oh, thank you for the follow and good night, Mark.
sexual abuse.
Thank you for the follow.
at the
Thank you for
hands
staying
of
around
their
for
father, and that they
pretty
killed their
long.
mother as well because she
Thanks a
allowed
lot.
it to happen.
We have evidence that will prove that they were experiencing fear, that they were in imminent danger of death or great bodily injury at the hands of their parents.
And when this came out, the media went wild. There were so many opinions.
But is
Many
that
people
true?
Felt bad for the boys and believed.
Were they actually
many
sexually
people
abused?
Thought it was purely a defense strategy. So the trial began 10 days later, July 20th, 1993. And they tried them both separately. So, you know, they had 2 different defense teams, 2 different juries, and normally they do these at different times, but they decided to do their trials at
the same time.
And this was being covered extensively. People could not get enough of this trial. It truly became a drama, a sensation. And there were definitely people that believed they were innocent and people who believed they were guilty.
There's no way.
Eric's friend
They
Craig
literally admitted
ended
it
up
at
talking
that
to the
point.
media a bunch. He did any interview he could.
Psychologically,
and
for
he had
sure.
co-written that Friends screenplay with Eric where the main character kills their parents for money. So it seemed like they planned the murder. And the media kind of portrayed Lyle as the older, more dominant brother that kind of convinced Eric to go along with his plan. And they actually made the decision to broadcast the whole trial live on TV for people to watch. So it became a reality TV show almost.
Yeah.
Opening day attracted a
Really?
dizzying assortment of spectators who descended on the Van Nuys courthouse.
Wow.
Girls were lining up at 4 o'clock in the morning and behaving like Lyle and Eric were rock stars. It was the hottest ticket in town. There were only 10 seats for the press. Inside, it was tense.
Wow,
and
this is like a
electric
whole,
as we
like,
waited for the brothers
Judge
to appear.
Judy thing.
And their grandmother, Maria Menendez, continued to support the boys throughout the entire trial. And she didn't even think the boys actually killed their parents. She still believed the theory that someone from the mob did it. So when Eric and Lyle walked in to the courtroom for their first day of trial, they did not look how they did at the arraignment hearing.
Oh, they're
their
actually
smiles
afraid,
were gone,
yeah.
and they seemed worn down, tired, exhausted, and they lost weight. They were very pale. They looked very depressed
worried that they were
during
gonna
the
lose.
proceedings. They just sat there staring blankly ahead, according to people who were there. And they had a really hard time in jail. Other prisoners apparently hated them, and they had to pay for protection in jail. So they were clearly really hoping that they would be found not guilty. So the prosecution argued that Eric and Lyle killed their parents in order to get financial gain and that they should get the death penalty.
And they were sitting there watching television.
I don't know.
Huh?
You don't know what they were doing?
I didn't go into the den.
Your brother went into the den.
Yes.
And the television was on.
Oh shit.
I guess I heard the television on. I don't remember.
When they go back,
they said they weren't
television.
home.
I don't know.
You mean to tell me after all of these years, sir, that your brother never told you what your parents were doing when he went in from the kitchen to the family room?
Are you asking me what I know now?
I'm curious if they're gonna turn
or
against
what I
each
knew
other.
then?
And the defense sought to prove that they were abused, that they were in danger, and they had to kill their parents or else their parents could have killed them. Eric's defense attorney was Leslie Abramson, who is a well-known advocate against the death penalty and took on high-profile criminal cases. She was like the best money could buy.
Yeah, I'm
She
sorry,
was known
she's
for being
screwed.
very tough and kind of a force to be reckoned with in the courtroom. She would break down people until they cried on the witness stand. Now, a lot of people think that Leslie purposely dressed the boys a specific way to make them seem younger.
Yeah.
Instead of suits, they wore sweaters, colorful sweaters. She argued that even though the boys seemed like they had a perfect life,
Wow,
on
this
the
lady's a
outside,
try-hard.
that truly their lives at home were absolute hell. She argued that they were traumatized by all of the abuse, including sexual abuse, that they had gotten from their father. And the sexual abuse that they claim to have gone through is horrific. They described it all in court. It was very graphic, very shocking. And she explained that
they would
Jose
lie, though.
would abuse the boys and Kitty would just watch and allow it to happen.
They're,
and
oh
never
my
stood up for
god.
them.
Do you
She
guys
said
think they're telling the
Jose
truth
was
or
a
lying?
cruel perfectionist whose
Yeah, because if they're
image
lying, I
was
think
everything
like,
to
that's
him,
kinda
and that he
yikes.
didn't really care much about his kids. She argued that he would be the type that would rather kill his kids than have the truth about their family come out. And
What
she explained that
the
Kitty
heck?
was living in hell as well. Apparently she was an alcoholic, she was a drug addict, and she was very depressed over her husband having all these affairs that she knew about. They said she was so upset, so distressed that she was a hazard to herself. She was a dangerous driver. She was a terrible housekeeper, pretty much a bad mom, and a suicidal mess, all behind closed doors. She
I
explained
think
that
it's a
their
mix
life
of both
was
being
totally
true.
out of
I bet they did it for money
control.
and
Nothing
for
like
revenge for what
according to
happened
her,
to
it
them
was
when they were
even
younger.
messy in the house when they were growing up. There was often feces around the house from their pet ferret. They also had a dog, and apparently the dog would go to the bathroom on the carpet, so it was just messy all over the place. And they also brought up that Lyle had this pet rabbit when he was growing up, and one morning he woke up.
It's hard to say with how
and
much
the
money they
head
have.
was bashed in. And she said that Jose and Kitty did this together. And Lyle was so traumatized by all this that he wet the bed until he was 14. And this is very disturbing, but they claim that they would take the sheets off the bed after this and put them on the breakfast table in the morning and make him sit and look at them to shame him. Also, they claimed that Kitty had blamed the boys for her not being able to have a successful career in broadcasting.
Okay, if
They
this
even
is true,
said
then this is like
that she
very
had
crazy
threatened
though.
to poison them at one point, so they were afraid of her. And then they made a really shocking claim and said that Kitty had been giving Eric genital exams every year until he was 15. And remember how I explained that Lyle was balding and used to wear a toupee? The week before she was murdered, she apparently ripped off his toupee in a fight, and that's how Eric found out that his brother was bald. He didn't even
Kitty
know.
is like,
and their family was
I
just
thought she
so
was like
full of
well known to
secrets,
be
and
like
this
the
was
nice
kind of
one of the
a
family.
breaking point
I'm pretty
for
sure
them.
that
The
that's
two
a
of them
lie.
started discussing how their family was toxic, and Eric started telling Lyle everything that his father had been doing to him for years, and it's very horrific. And when Lyle found out what had been happening to his brother, he apparently threatened his dad to stop, and he said if he didn't, they would go public. But Jose allegedly responded and said, "He's my son, I'll do whatever I want with him." And that's when they said that the boys knew that they had to do something because they were afraid of their dad. They were afraid maybe he would kill them to prevent this secret from getting out. And they decided to have both of the brothers give testimony at their trials.
But they
And
probably
I
started
think
saying
that
different
was
things, right?
absolutely crucial because when you hear it from them, it's just so upsetting. Whether you believe them or not, just the details that they talked about were so shocking and disturbing on so many levels. They gave very graphic descriptions of all of the sexual abuse that both of them had endured and how their father had raped them and used inanimate objects on them.
Not the
And they
dildoids.
recounted all of this on the stand in front of everybody in court, and oftentimes they were hysterically crying through their interviews.
Did your father have sexual contact with you?
Yes.
And how did it start?
It just started with, after sports practices, he would massage me. I just told him that I didn't want to do this.
I think that's really good acting, or like...
And he said that he didn't mean to hurt me. He loved me.
Did you tell your mom?
Yes. She told me to stop it. And that I was exaggerating. And that my dad has to punish me when I do things wrong.
Oh my God, I believe them.
You about telling people.
He just said that it was our secret.
It does feel realistic,
bad things would
though.
happen to me if I told
see why people think
one of your relatives testifying that he witnessed an incident in which your father removed you from a family gathering, took you in your bedroom, and struck and socked you in the stomach, and you didn't cry. Do you remember that?
Right.
Okay. And so during the course of your upbringing, learning how to control your emotions was very important, correct?
Right.
Okay. Now, in addition to lying to the officers who came to the scene, you then went to the police department for an interview with Sergeant Edmonds. Do you remember that?
Yes.
And when you saw Sergeant Edmonds, you lied to him too, correct?
I'm wondering where the turning point, because this is a very good
Now,
case.
at the time that the police arrived at your parents' home, shortly thereafter, a family friend or a friend of yours and your brother's arrived, and that was Mark Heffernan, correct?
Shortly after, at the house, yes.
Okay. And he accompanied you to the police department, is that correct? Or he went in a separate car?
Right.
Okay. And did you lie to him too?
In the sense that we didn't tell him what happened, yes.
Okay, so you again to him portrayed yourself as having been a witness and not a suspect in this crime, correct?
Right.
Have you ever tried to end the sex through confrontation or violence against your father?
Oh, that's a good question.
Yes.
Yes? You were violent towards your father?
Oh, no, not violence, no. But I said no to him once.
You said no once.
Yes.
On that particular occasion, after you said no, did your father become upset?
Yes.
And did he
I'm surprised they didn't pull out the I forgot card.
violent?
Yes.
You had been well taken care of all
Because they can't
your
do
life.
anything, they say I forgot.
And so when your father, through your mother, said that he was going to disown you, you were worried about that, weren't you?
I was not well taken care of my entire life. I had every dime I ever wanted, though. That's for sure.
But the public had very little sympathy for the boys.
Like if they ask get asked the question, right?
Fact,
Like, did you do this? Did you do that? Just say I
mocked
forgot.
on Saturday Night Live, and the clip of it is pretty cringe. I don't understand how this was at all funny at any point.
Yeah, I know. The idea is to convince the jury, but like, I mean, like for any questions or anything that's ever been asked,
once again,
that could screw them over.
Wait, this is
your
real?
Testimony that you and your brother Eric, in fact, had nothing to do with the murder of your parents, Jose and Kitty Menendez.
That's correct.
He looks so old.
Then can you tell the court who did murder your parents?
Our other two brothers, Danny Menendez and Jose Menendez Jr.
Is that real laughing? What? No way.
I can't believe this is real. I can't believe this is real.
Jose Menendez Jr.
And you are both sons of Jose
Wait, what's
and Kitty
SNL?
Menendez.
Oh, so these aren't the real
And
guys.
you are not
Okay.
Lyle and Eric Menendez pretending to be two different Menendez brothers.
No, we are not.
Oh, so they made fun of them.
It is your testimony
Okay.
that it was you who killed your parents, Jose and Kitty Menendez, and not your brothers, Lyle and Eric Menendez, to whom you bear a striking resemblance.
Yes.
And that you forced your two innocent brothers, Lyle and Eric Menendez,
but this is
to
kinda like-
confess to the murder.
This is like such a bro moment, though. How they're making fun of them.
At one point during the trial, they had their female cousin come up and testify that Lyle had actually confided in her as a kid when they were like 8 that he was being molested. And one thing that she said in court that was pretty odd, really stuck out to me, is she said that the boys liked to sleep with their mother whenever their father was out of town. They would argue over who got to sleep in her bed, which I mean, a lot of people do that. It's not that weird. But they did this until they were 15, which she noted seemed a little odd to her. Her friend Craig, who had been talking to the media a lot, had been told to stop talking to the media, been banned from talking to the media, and now he was going to be testifying in court. And he testified about how Eric had confessed to the murders 12 days after they happened. And he also talked about the screenplay that they had written, which kind of was almost premeditating a murder, which they actually did not have the screenplay as evidence in court. They just discussed it, but the jury wasn't able to, you know, read into it.
He said that he went back outside and his brother was standing there with 2 shotguns and said, "Let's do it." And they walked inside.
Imagine like watching
Eric
your
went up to
friend,
the door on
the
the left,
friend that you
which was slightly
trusted,
open,
just testifying
and
against
the door
you
on the
in court
right.
like this.
Lyle went up and put his shoulder against the door on the right. Eric said he looked in and saw his parents sitting on the couch, and Lyle swung the door open and shot his father, and looked at Eric and said, "Shoot, Mom." And Eric said he shot his mom as she was standing up and yelling.
They also had the computer expert that wiped the computers come in and testify, and he talked about how eerie it was being in the
by the way,
house.
Andrea, are you there?
coroner
Can you type
showed really graphic
exclamation mark
pictures
watch
of
time
the crime
with no
scene
space?
Oh my
to the jury, which definitely made them very emotional. And the defense had tried really hard to get them to not show these photos in court. They thought that they were too graphic, but they went ahead anyway, and they made a big impact. And one thing that kept being brought up in trial was this movie called Billionaire Boys Club. This came out just 3 weeks before the murders took place. And Dr. Oziel claimed in court that Eric had mentioned in one of the tapes that was not used in court that this movie inspired the crime because it was so similar to the way that their parents were killed. It was the story about a group of rich boys in Beverly Hills who killed their father for money. And not only that, the characters wore Rolexes and drove a Jeep Wrangler. This movie was actually released by Live Entertainment.
Oh my gosh.
Company. Now they weren't able to play the movie in court, but they were able to bring it up and argue that they could have been inspired by it. So the whole trial was very long. If we went over every detail, we'd be here all day. It lasted 4.5 months. But it finally came to a close in January of '94. And the jury actually deliberated for about a month. And this is really interesting, but they were actually split by gender.
What?
All the females on the jury wanted to acquit, and all of the men on the jury wanted to convict. They could not come to a conclusion, so they decided to go with a mistrial.
Do you view this as at least a partial victory, despite not knowing everything about the deadlock?
I have very high standards of what's victory. So I don't view a hung jury as a victory, no. It's not a loss, but it's not a win. I mean, you're still in square one, running around in circles.
So the LA County District Attorney immediately announced that there would be a retrial for both of the boys. The second trial began in October of 1995, and this time it was just one jury. And this time was different because they decided not to allow the media in. It had become too much of a public circus last time, so they wanted to keep it under wraps. And this time, the judge decided to not allow them to talk so much about the sexual abuse that the boys had.
They did not get the special
Other than that, the arguments that they made
had.
were pretty much the same. It was pretty much the same trial repeated. This time, though, the defense really went after Dr. Oziel and tried to discredit him as much as possible. They said he was a liar and a cheat and just an overall bad guy. And they claimed that he was planning to use these recordings as blackmail, that he was never going to go to the police. He was going to keep the secret and blackmail the boys, maybe get some money out of them. Who knows? Okay. So when he testified this time, it lasted for 6 days.
It's weird because like I thought this
and
Dr.
this led
Oziel,
to
that was
two
like
of his
a lot more
mistress
like
filing complaints against him,
not.
and the state also recommended that he lose his license.
Oh
and the
my
defense was hoping
gosh.
that this would kind of distract the jury from Eric and Lyle. And when Eric testified, it actually lasted several weeks. Apparently, he called his father a killer, said he was very afraid of him and thought that he would have killed someone if he didn't kill him first. During the cross-examination, Eric actually was caught in a lie. He said that they had bought pistols for protection 3 years before the murder. But it turned out the store he claimed to have bought them from wasn't even open at the time. And so the prosecution was able to ask the jury, you know, if he could lie about that, what else is he capable of lying about? Is it all made up? The main thing that was different with this trial, though, was Lyle did not testify, which was an interesting move. So this time the jury deliberated for nearly 3 weeks.
What the... I
Yeah,
need
what
to
led
know,
to the
what
point
does
where he said
testify
that?
mean?
Oh, okay, but like I'm curious, what led to the point where he talked about the pistol that he bought for protection? Like,
a formal written or spoken statement. Did not testify. So he didn't speak at all? Is that what that means?
Yeah.
Thank you for all the new members, by the way.
Didn't speak at all.
And they ended up finding Eric and Lyle guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit murder. And before they were sentenced, they decided they wanted to have their word out to the public. And they did an interview with Barbara Walters. And this is a really famous interview. It's very interesting. A lot of it's on YouTube. I recommend watching it.
Do you think the media has portrayed you fairly? Can you tell?
I don't know if anyone can be portrayed fairly in the media, who they are.
Well, let me say it. There are people, a great number of people, who think that you two are spoiled brats, that you are evil, that you are monsters. What do you say to them?
That's not who I am, but I can't defend that.
I would be surprised if anybody that was present at the trial and saw the whole thing rather than snippets on the news would feel that.
So the jury ended up deciding that they were not going to move forward with the death penalty because Eric and Lyle had no history of violence, but they completely rejected the idea that this was done in self-defense in any way or that the boys were abused. The Menendez brothers were sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole on July 2nd, 1996.
Wow.
And this is one of the most controversial verdicts of all time. This is highly debated to this day, and I would say the majority of people are on the side of the Menendez brothers now. Maybe not at the time this was all happening, but like I said earlier in the video, I think people looking back at this are seeing it with new eyes and are thinking twice. And when they were heading into the sentencing period, the brothers ended up putting in a request for them to at least be put in the same prison so they could be
Same
together.
prison or same cell?
But that was denied.
Oh!
Shocking. Lyle and Eric were separated and
Okay.
sent to separate prisons.
Whoa.
September 10th,
That's a big
1996, they waved at each other from across the prison courtyard, and that was
kind of
the
weird
last
how
they
that's
would see each other
documented.
for decades, which was very, very hard on them. They are extremely close, and they were also considered maximum security prisoners, so they were separated from all the other inmates and spent a lot of time alone. They tried to appeal the outcome, but on February 27th, the California Court of Appeal upheld their convictions. In May of 1998, they tried to get the Supreme Court to review the case.
Do I think they
declined
deserve
to do
it?
so. They've tried several times to file habeas
think
corpus
if
petitions
everything is
with the
true,
Supreme
right?
Court of California, but
I
they've been
think
denied.
they deserve it,
times.
but not
2005
because
was
of.
the last time that they were denied. And
Yes, the crime they did is really
been
bad,
kinda
right?
stuck ever
But I
since.
think they deserve it because they
since
tried
then,
so hard
Eric
to
and Lyle both
not
got married
to
in
hide it.
prison.
You know what I mean?
In 1996, Lyle married Anna Erickson, but then in 2001, Anna
Like, the
ended
more
up finding
effort they
out that
tried
he had been
to
cheating on her in
avoid
jail.
the
He was writing
problem,
to other
the
women,
more
so
their punishment
What?
she
increased.
divorced him. Then he got married again in 2003 to a woman named Rebecca. Eric married a woman named Tammy in 1999.
Wait, is this when they were
and
out of prison?
He had been writing to her, they pen pals for like 6 years before they got married. In 2005, she was interviewed by ABC News, and she said that their relationship was something that she's dreamed about for a long time. In 2005, she even published a book called They Said We'd Never Make It, My Life with Eric Menendez. In 2017, they did an interview with People magazine and explained that even though they were in separate prisons, they remained really close, even though they couldn't see or talk to each other. They even were communicating through their wives. They were sending letters back and forth. They would even play chess through their wives through the letters.
Ew.
But they finally got to see each other again in February of 2018 when Lyle was actually transferred to the same prison that his brother was in. And when they finally got to see each other in person, it had been 22 years. And people who were there said that they just hugged each other in silence for minutes, and they were both just crying hysterically. And after that, they actually allowed them to have a few hours alone together. At first, they were housed in separate areas in the jail, but eventually they moved them into the same unit.
Alright.
So now they get to spend time together every day. They get to have meals together and
Oh, so that's
walk
them now.
around, get exercise together outside. And a lot of their family members still stand by them to this day, and they're very happy that they're at least now together. Some family members have even spoken out that they are absolutely sure that Eric and Lyle really did go through years of horrific abuse at the hand of their father, and that their mother let it happen. And that's what makes this case so controversial. Some people think that this is 100% a fabricated defense by two rich kids who got greedy and killed their parents, and many others see it the complete opposite way, that these were two very abused
I think it's a mix of both.
Who were terrified and felt like they had no other choice but to kill their parents in self-defense. So that leads me to the question of the day. What do you guys think happened? Do you think the Menendez brothers are guilty or not guilty, and why?
They definitely did the murder, I'll say that. I think they definitely did the murder.
Wow.
Their motives behind the murder.
Shocked.
I think the money part was probably just a side thing, you know, like they probably
I feel like I'm leaning towards believing them. I feel like they killed out of greed. I feel like they killed out of resentment with the benefit of getting.
Okay, I think that like, let me just like put something in the background as I talk about this. I don't know this. I think that like, Andrea, do you think they did it? There are people who've been through the same trauma and doesn't do that. See, but that's the difference, Andrea, is that even though they went through the same trauma, they have different mental strength, you know? They had like, oh, I see what you mean by it. So they had to think about I mean, I think it was more or less of like as they were doing the murder, right? Because they were already so deep into it, they're like, we might as well follow through, you know what I mean? Like, maybe the first reload was a bit of a struggle, right? But then like the second and third reload, they were probably like, okay, we're already so deep into this, we gotta continue this. Like, there's no backing out now. I think the spending spree was to cope with it though. I think them spending the money was to cope with it. Cause like, when you live your life, you know, like knowing all this money is open to you, and when you finally receive it all, the best thing you could like really tell yourself is to like just do whatever makes you even happier, you know, and like, you know, I guess like drink your sorrows away, you know, like the alcohol, you know, and stuff. But do you think they deserve it, Andrea? I think they deserve it, right? But like, they deserve it in the sense that like, I'm not saying like murder is good, I'm not saying murder is fine or anything, but like, I think they deserve it in the sense that like, because they tried so hard to avoid getting caught, that like, it's built up to what they deserve now. But I do think though, like, they shouldn't have, I feel like the punishment should have been a bit harsher. Like, I mean like, the years in prison are harsh, right? But I mean like the way he was able to like communicate with like get married, you know, get a woman and so I feel like that should not have been allowed to happen, because that means like he had like some level of like, how do I say this, some level of freedom that I don't think he should have deserved. But that's my opinion, you know, like, yeah, like he like life in prison, right? Like, you know how she said, oh, he was able to play chess through letters with his wife. Oh, no, I meant like, I don't think he deserves to like have a wife, you know, be able to like have that as much communication as he should have had. You know what I mean? I mean, obviously, you know, he 22 years in 26, whatever, 20 something years in prison is like his whole life. It's a big part of your life, right? But like, the way he was, I mean, like let's say like his father did, like, that's like, I'm not saying I didn't feel bad, right? Let's say like even if his dad and everything, right, like did all those stuff were true, like what I'm saying is, I think the real crime, like, yes, there is the crime that he killed his parents, right? But the real, like, for me, my personal like moral ethic, whatever it is, right, is that how like they tried so hard to get out of it. Like, you know what I mean? Like, the trial lasted for 4 months, you know, like he testified for like a week, right? Like, so much effort was put into him lying and trying to get out. I think that's where the real punishment is, right? When from day one he could have just been like, I killed my parents, like, but I killed my parents because of X, Y, and Z, right? But he's like, the fact that it dragged out for so long, and he was trying to like, And also, like, the fact that he did lie about the pistol thing, which, again, like, I'm not saying what he says is true or not true, right? But the fact that he lied about the pistol thing is like, you're purposely messing with our hearts. You're purposely messing with, you're making me have that X for doubt moment. Like, should I doubt you now at this point? You're making me question myself. So it's like, that's what I think his punishment is. So, yeah, you know. I think that's all for me. Do you have anything else you want to say, Andrea? If not, I guess I could end myself now. Oh, you probably disconnected. Alright, I guess I'll end it here. Oh. What goes into the child doesn't matter to me? Oh, okay. So do you think they deserve it though? Yeah, but then like, again, Andrea, like, if you admit to the crimes earlier, your punishment doesn't get as harsh. Was it? Is it called pleading guilty or whatever? Like, if you just admit to the crime, then like your punishment isn't as harsh. So, like, if they did that from the beginning, then like, yeah, I would probably be like, oh yeah. You know what I mean? What is this? This is just weird music. Alright, I guess I could end myself here if there's nothing to say left. I think the outcome was great if everything is true. Yeah, but they would. But now they would be sentenced. Okay. But like, yeah, that's what like my real thing is. Because they lied, like the fact that the probability, of course the probability of them lying is always there, right? But the fact that he lied about the pistol thing is like even worse. It's like, should I trust you at this point anymore? Like, and it's not like I'm gonna disregard everything else he said. It's more like it's more like, why would you do this? Like why would you mess with me? It's like, yeah, but I don't mean at that point. I mean like since the beginning, right? Like since the very beginning, where it was like before everything got all messed up and scrambled. But yeah. Alright, I guess I'll end myself here. Alright, good night. Alright, thank everyone. Everyone's still here. Thank you, good night. Maybe I should do this more often.